Healthcare workers desperately need face shields, and we are working to try to get them a lot more than is possible with 3D printing. Welcome to another episode. As I mentioned in the intro, we're trying to get a lot more of these face shields. I'm going to take this off in a short moment, but before I do, I just want to explain a few things about this face shield. This is made out of a piece of clear plastic that the local group designed in Washington State. It has a part that folds over the top. We call it the Origami Shield. The nice thing about it is you can have a fairly simple, lightweight frame, and you still have protection over the top as well as in the front, as you can see here. So let me take this off and then explain a little bit more about what this episode is about, and then what part 2 will be about, and probably part 3 as well. The local Washington group formed, I think, about 3 weeks ago on Facebook, and we now have hundreds of members. A lot of people are 3D printing the frames for the face shields. We started with a design from Sweden, and then switched to a local design about a week ago that is meant to be more comfortable for the wearers, lighter, etc. The problem, though, is we just can't keep up. Even though the group has delivered something like 3,000 shields in the past week or two, the number of outstanding orders from local healthcare workers has increased from 4,000 to 10,000 during the last week alone. So obviously 3D printing just isn't going to get us where we need to be. The best way, of course, is injection molding, and it takes a while to get the supply chain ramped up to produce enough injection molded frames to meet the entire industry's needs, or the needs in the US, I should say. I don't know how long that's going to take. I'm guessing, and this is just a pure guess, that it'll take a month or two for the larger supply chain to catch up. So what I've been focused on is, how do we fulfill the short-term need? How do we ramp up production in the short term to be able to meet the need now, and then have the larger supply chain come on later? So I had a stopgap idea, which is what this episode is going to be about. And then I've been working with a local company on a fully injection molded version, and that should come online the middle of this coming week. I'll have a link below to his videos. Peyton Dean from Brick Tactical, great guy to work with, and he's about half an hour from my house. So what I'm going to be, as I say, episode 2 is going to be about the injection molded version, and episode 3 will be probably a follow-up that shows the finished parts and provides more information. So my idea for the short term, the really short term, was to use a combination of plastic strips and injection molded parts that I can make on my small machines to be able to create kits that would allow makers to produce the frames for face shields at a higher rate than we can now with 3D printing. I was estimating that I could probably produce 25 to 50 kits an hour, which means that, if I worked for 10 hours, which I probably wouldn't, that means I could produce between 500 and 1,000 kits a day. So more realistically, probably to 200 to 400 kits a day. That was the idea. I'm going to show you the process that I went to and where I ended up, and I'm going to call this one a failure. And the reason I'm going to call it a failure is because there are some assumptions I made up front that were not correct, and fixing those resulted in face shield frames that are a lot more time consuming to make than I had originally thought. So when I'm spending my time completely focused on these, I can probably make 20 frames an hour, but that's a lot of work. And so I also have to do all the work myself, because a lot of the work is the injection molding work. There really isn't that much that can be farmed out, so it didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to be. But I still think you might find a lot of the details interesting, because this approach might be useful for something else. So let's head to the computer, and I'll show you the design. Oh, and this is what it looks like. Let me show you a version that doesn't have the shield on it. You can see it has some injection molded parts right here, and then the two strips of plastic are held together with injection molding, which was not the original idea. And then this is very flexible, so it'll fit on your forehead and be pulled back by elastic strips. Anyway, let's head to the computer. My idea was to make a kit that included some strips of plastic, as well as some injection molded pieces, as well as some gluing jigs that people could 3D print. And the idea is that you would glue the strips together with plastic cement, the clear type that basically dissolves the plastic and welds them together. And then you would glue these pieces on. Now, this idea is something that I figured I could make kits, probably 50 kits an hour, to be able to produce these. I could get other people to create the strips of plastic, and we could federate this and really ramp up production. But I ran into an issue, which is that these two strips of plastic, it was really difficult to get them to glue together and be strong enough so that they didn't come apart and they were consistent. So then I switched to the second design, and in the second design I did two things. One is I made these strips a little bit narrower, and that was based on some feedback of another design. And then the other thing is I changed this part here, so it's molded over the two strips. By overmolding, as it's called, it's not going to come apart. The plastic here shrinks, so it holds it firmly in place. Not only that, because this plastic is really hot when it comes in, it slightly melts the surface of this plastic, which means it effectively melts this plastic together with this plastic. So that means they're going nowhere at all. Now let me back up a little bit and explain to you how I came up with this design. There's a local group that got together, and a bunch of 3D printers started printing a design that was called the Swedish North American design. There were some issues with it. We got feedback from healthcare workers who were using it, and so some of the local people designed this. This is actually version 1. They're now on version 2. It's a fairly lightweight headband that has the shield mounted on the front with 6 mounting points. A band here for the head, and then this is for elastic straps to hold it to your head. So I wanted to make sure that my design was compatible with the face shields that they're making for this. So what I did when I unisolated this, you can see I pretty much created my design so it mostly matches the one that they're producing. Now I say mostly because if you look at these things like here, such as the strips of plastic, they're not an exact match because the plastic is going to bend differently when you take a straight piece of plastic and form it into a semicircle. The important thing though is that the spacing here of all of these is exactly the same. So I used this to come up with the design for the injection molded parts. And there are a couple things that are interesting. One is that on these parts, I put draft angle on here so that it would be easy to injection mold everywhere except for the back. So if we look here and I look at just that, this part here has no draft. So I added plenty of draft on this side to make sure that it would be easy to pull this out of the mold. I start with some sheets of 1/16 inch thick ABS plastic. I have two different widths. This is the shorter one, and then there's a longer one. And the two together, when they're attached, form just the right curve for your headband. So let me show you the process that I use. I have these 3D printed spacers that give me the correct width here. So they're both set to, they have a little lip on them, and they're set to 10 millimeters, which is the width that I want for each of the strips. So then I push this up against here, move these out of the way, and then I use just a regular utility knife. And you only need to score it once, but scoring it twice certainly doesn't hurt. And then I move that to the edge right here. And I have another little tool that I 3D printed that has a slot in it that's a little bit more than 1/16 of an inch thick. So I can put this over the material And then I just go like this, and you can see that it's breaking that, but not all the way through. And then when I get to the end, I just push it in the other direction, and that breaks the strip off the rest of the way. So now I just need to make a whole bunch of these, and then I can start the assembly. And this one, you know, when I'm filming, things always don't go as well as they should. This one is wider at one end than it should be, so this is actually a piece of scrap. But let me go ahead and actually make some real ones. I'll let the camera roll and I'll speed it up so that you can see the process a couple times. And I'm going to make sure that I am more careful about this. Okay, so that is a piece that is a good quality piece, and this is a piece that I can use. So I'll put that in my pile and just keep going. The plastic strips, after I'm done snapping them out, have a slight burr on either side where I used the knife and then broke it. The other side, the back side, let's see if you can see that, is actually a textured side. And I want the parts that I'm going to glue on to be on the smooth side. And the smooth side also is the side that I'm going to have toward the person's head because it's smooth. So I have a deburring tool here, and I just take the strip of plastic and put it on the edge of the table, and then just take a quick run across it, and you can see it produces a thin bit of plastic. And now it's a smooth edge and there's no burr. So I just do that to both sides, and when I'm not filming it's pretty fast, but it still does take time. So one of the things you're going to see with this whole process is that this is pretty time consuming. I had been using polystyrene plastic in here, and I need to purge the barrel and replace it with some ABS plastic. So to purge it, what I do is I put the molds so that, okay, I've got some plastic there. So I put the mold so it'll be touching the edge of the nozzle, but it won't impede the flow of the plastic. And then what I can do is I'm going to turn the pressure way down for injection. And then basically just purge whatever will come out in a single cycle. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but you know, when I pull it out this way, grab some pliers. And you can see there's the bit of molten plastic that came out of the first purge. Now it turns out that the ABS I'm going to be using is black. So that means I'll know when I've purged everything that's in there, because it will have been replaced by the black pellets. The last shot came out a combination of black and gray, so that means we're getting pretty close. I start out with two strips, one short and one long, and then I want to make sure that the textured part is together on both of them, because that way the glue will be on the smooth part and the face will be on the smooth part. Then I want to make sure that the longer one is toward the cleat. So the cleat is going to be on the outside, and that means I want the short one on the inside. So I put them in the mold like this, put the other mold half on like so, and then I can put it in the machine. So I take the mold and I'll put it in here, and the first thing I want to do is adjust the end stop here so that I don't have to visually line this up each time. The end stop will hold it in place, and that way I can just, it also uses it to push it out, but I don't need it for this particular part. So I'll get this lined up like so on the end stop, and then important, close the clamp right here, and then I can press here to inject, and then after 6 seconds Then I refill the barrel with plastic, and I want to get it so it's about 1/4 inch or so below the top of the lip. And then I can release the clamp and pull it out. And at this point, I should be able to just pull it apart. And it looks like I need a little bit more pressure. I don't have quite as much pressure. So I'll turn the pressure up, and I'll try the other side. This is going to be a discard because I can't overmold again. But getting it out is pretty simple. So now I'll do the same thing. Grab it like this, and you can see we have curve now. And then put it in the same way so that the cleat is going to be on the outside. Put it back in the machine. I had forgotten to refill the barrel. And then do another cycle. Okay, let's pull it apart. Okay, that's a complete shot. And as you can see, it just comes right out of the mold. And then while it's still hot, I can push like this, and there really isn't much of the gate left by doing it that way. I have two other molds that are involved in making these headbands. This one is to create the 2 pins for the front, and this will create 2 parts, which is enough for 2 headbands. And then I have, and I'll show you a close-up of the mold. The plastic comes in here and just feeds out between these two, and then this is an alignment pin, which is a pretty tight fit on one side, but then on the other side it's a very slightly loose fit, which allows me to pull the parts, the 2 mold halves apart easily. The second mold is, not that one, the second mold is for the side parts, and each mold makes 2 of those, which is enough for 1 headband. So I'm going to make a couple of these. I didn't have the alignment pin on this one because my drill press is down, and so I couldn't ream the holes to the correct size. I could have put it back on the milling machine like I did for these others to make it slightly like about 2 thousandths or 1 thousandths, a little bit larger in diameter, and then it's the perfect fit. So this one is pretty much the same width as the other mold, so I can just put it in and then immediately inject the part. And then over here, I can just push it out, and then when I open it, you can see there the part is, and sometimes I can just grab it like that and the part comes out. Sometimes I have to use pliers. But with the amount of draft that I used, it comes out really easily. Let's see if this works. Okay, so what I have to do typically is play around with the mold for a little while until I get the right temperature and the right injection pressure. I've switched materials since I was doing this before. I switched from polystyrene to ABS. Polystyrene is not good for medical applications, but ABS is fine. So that means to get this to fill, I just need to play around a little bit more. And I'm going to do that off camera. Okay, after some fiddling around, I finally got it so it's a full shot. And as you can see, I can't pull it out. But if I grab the pliers and just kind of go like that, it pops right out. So it's not too bad to make these parts. But again, all of these little bits and pieces add up. So if I want to make a whole bunch of kits a day, you can see that this is all manual. My machines are not automatic. So I have to be here doing the injection molding the whole time. Now the other thing that I do, I'll show you a little trick, is I have this counter that I'm sure you've all seen. And so as I'm making parts, I just click on that to keep track of how many I've made, and that way I don't have to keep a count in my head. I 3D printed a jig to make it a lot easier to assemble the parts. So I take a frame and put it into the jig, which is a lot easier when I'm not recording. but it goes in like so. Okay, and then I can glue the parts in place. So I usually start with this part here, and let me explain something about these wedges that I 3D printed. So one of the things I did when I 3D printed these wedges is I wanted to make sure that it was printed this way, so that the lines would go this way. And the reason I want the lines, this way. The reason I want the lines to be across is so that this has kind of a ratcheting action when I put it into the jig. If the lines went this way, then what I discovered is that it popped out of the gluing jig much too easily. So I start with the piece for the front, and I take some of this styrene cement, as you can see here. And what I do is I take this part here, and then I put a nice layer of glue onto it. As you can see, it's quite shiny. Put this into here, and then I have one of the pieces marked with a little ridge here, so that I know which one is supposed to go here. And then this, as you can see, it kind of ratchets in place, and then it holds it firmly in place. So this ensures that the curve all the way across is in contact with the plastic here, and then it can dry in place. Then I do the same thing with the side pieces. So I'll grab a side piece, put glue on it, put it in the frame like so, or the jig like so, and then again that ratchets in place and holds it very firmly. Go around to the other side. So you can see this part is pretty easy. This part I got right. But the amount of injection molding it takes is, that's an issue. Okay, so now this is all set to go. And what I did is I actually printed a set of these jigs so that I can glue one, move it to the side, and basically go around in a circle. So by the time I get back to one that's full, like this one here, the glue has set and I can remove it from the jig and everything is fine. So I'm just assembling one right now, so I'll pause the camera, we'll come back, and then I will show you taking it out of the jig. It's been a few minutes now, and so I can just remove these wedges. And then I can just pull this out, like so. And there I have a finished frame for a face shield. So that part of the assembly is pretty simple and pretty fast. It's just making all of the parts on the injection molding machine that are time consuming. I hope you found this episode helpful. This has consumed a lot of my time recently. And in the back is a preview of the next episode where we'll look at the fully injection molded version. Please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. I have links below as well for the 3D models for this, as well as to Peyton Dean's YouTube channel and a few other things. So please check the comments, the description below as well. See you next time.